record. And by the way, I don't know if you care one way or another, but I will share this recording back with you as well as the snippets that I plan to use. Sound good?
All right. Thank you.
All right. All right. Well, so let's get the ball rolling. I wonder, really the first question is, I wonder if you can introduce yourself and introduce what you do.
Hello, I'm Robert Broadbelt, and I am a judge of the Los Angeles Superior Court.
Okay. And you've been doing that for?
11 and a half years.
Wow. Wow. As I said, I really appreciate you spending the time and sharing your thoughts on this topic. So the topic is, as I said, executive presence. And I wonder how, and it seems to me like it's fairly important in your role, but before we get into how important it is or it isn't, I wonder if that term resonates for you. What does it mean to you? And how would you describe it?
You know, I'm not familiar with the term in my line of work, but what I would liken it to for judges would be judicial temperament and our presence in the courtroom, because what we're required to do is, first of all, establish control of the courtroom, because sometimes people's tempers flare, people come in very stressed, and so we need to maintain control of the courtroom. Sometimes people don't know how to behave in a courtroom, because a courtroom is a place where the goal is for the court or a jury to make decisions in a rational manner based on evidence and reason in a dispassionate way. And so what I'm trying to do is cool the emotional level so that decisions can be made either by me or the jury based on evidence and facts that are presented. The other thing I'm trying to do is that I think is really important in court is to make everyone feel that they had an opportunity to be heard, and that when attorneys or parties, or if they're self-represented, are presenting their cases to me, I make a real effort to make sure that they feel that they were heard, that they got to tell their side of the story, which is what we call due process, that it's notice and an opportunity to be heard. And so I work really hard at making the parties and attorneys feel that they had a fair opportunity to be heard. But of course, what I have to balance that against being efficient, because I don't have unlimited time, of course. I don't have the whole day to spend on one case. Maybe I have 5 or 10 minutes or 15 minutes. So that's what I'm really trying to do. I'm also, in terms of demeanor and temperament, I try to create a calm atmosphere in the courtroom. I want people to feel that they were treated with civility and respect, and that's very important to me. So those are my goals. I think the goals that I try to achieve in the courtroom.
Okay. So if I was going to ask someone who sat in the courtroom observing you for some extended period of time, how would they describe judicial temperament as displayed by you? Concisely, how might they describe that?
I would like to think that they would describe it that I run a formal courtroom, because that's how I maintain order and make sure everyone understands the solemnity of the proceeding. That this is not television. It's not like courtrooms you see on TV where anybody can just speak up or interrupt anytime. So it's very important to maintain order, and that's so that we have a rational procedure where everyone can be heard and have a fair opportunity to be heard. I'd like to think they would also recognize or comment on that I try really hard to treat everyone with civility, and that I demand civility from everyone who appears before me. I demand that everyone treat everyone else with civility and the same respect that you would expect to be treated with.
So I'm going to ask that question again. I'm going to ask it. I'm going to ask you to respond in a fashion where, if it's okay with you, uh, with using kind of terminology where this might apply to people who are not judges and have no intention of being judges, but some traits that you apply.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Um, and then a follow-up question I'm going to ask is, and so what powers or what behaviors does that kind of presence um, you know, I don't know what the proper terminology is, apply, what powers does that give you, or what is the what behaviors does that generate, I guess, in the audience? And I'll figure out a better way to ask that, but that's the question. All right, so question. So you talk about judicial temperament. And when you talk about judicial temperament, what traits or behaviors, if somebody was observing you for a few days, what traits or behaviors would they say your judicial temperament consists of?
I'd like to think that they would say that I make a great effort to treat everyone with respect and that I'm a good listener. Because I think it's really important to, first of all, listen to people. And that doesn't just apply to judges. I think it deals with anyone in any business or professional context or interpersonal context as well, relationships, is to be a good listener. And that actually is something I've had to work on a great deal to develop skills to try to be a good listener. And first of all, I find that I learn a lot, so it helps me make decisions. But second of all, I think it's really important for the other person to feel that they've been heard.
So that person who's observing you and observing that you do convey significant uh, judicial temperament, what, I guess, behaviors within the courtroom does that temperament facilitate, if that makes sense?
So on my part,
I think in the part of maybe of the people, on the part of the people in the courtroom. So you mentioned, for example, it helps, your intention is for people to remain calm. Your intention is for people to, treat the situation with respect and not just pop up and do whatever they want to do as if they were on TV. That's the kind of thing that if you convey the proper judicial temperament, that will, what's the point or objective of that? Or impact of that, power of that, maybe is more appropriate.
I think for me, it's to make sure people feel that they got a fair opportunity to tell their side of the story, and that I understood their side of the story. I understood and gave them a fair opportunity to present their side of the case before I made the decision. But I think there's certain things that I've learned also in terms of showing that you're a good listener. One thing I've learned to do, which I personally, when I'm on the bench, I'm listening to someone present their case. I find it's better if I lean forward
Mhm.
so I can be focused. If I'm sitting back, I tend to get lazy and I
Hmm.
may tune out.
Hmm.
So that's one small thing that I've learned, that I try to sit forward at all times. And I think it also conveys a message to the speaker that I'm engaged, and I'm listening to, that I'm hearing what they have to say, and I understand it.
Yeah. How interesting. So you said that developing the skill of really listening was something you had to pay, real attention to. That wasn't something that just came naturally.
That's right. That's right. I've had to work on it, and I still work on it every day.
What makes it so difficult? And what do you think you do differently than perhaps you might do in an everyday conversation?
Yeah, I try not to interrupt people. I try to let them finish what they're having to say. Sometimes I have to interrupt someone if they're going on too long, or they're saying something inappropriate or that's not respectful to someone. But I try to let them finish, and I try to listen to what they have to say. So I really work on trying not to interrupt people. The body language, as I mentioned, of sitting forward and looking, making eye contact with the person, I think is very important, to make them feel that you're actually listening and hearing what they have to say. And I also I try to speak very when it's my turn to speak. I try to be very direct and I use very plain language. I don't use big words, and I try to keep my language very simple, and keep my message simple.
I would assume that that in your courtroom, there are people that present themselves with their own temperament that commands your attention, commands your respect. That um, I, I don't know whether it's defendants, whether it's, and probably defendants not the right terminology. The what is the proper terminology? The what is the proper terminology? I'm spacing it out.
I think I know what you mean in terms
Well, I mean,
of
it's the terminology of the people who are in your court. There's people on either side of the case. That's all I mean.
terms of
I'm
people
just,
being effective, or are you?
oh no, I'm just talking about what's the term of the people who are presenting their cases or either
We have plaintiffs and
and defendants.
defendants,
Okay,
and then they may be represented by attorneys.
right, okay. And so I was really a long and roundabout way of saying, I'm sure you observe this in the courtroom, and I'm sure you observe when it's lacking in the courtroom. And I'm wondering if there is anybody in particular, maybe there's an attorney that shows up again and again, who you think does a particularly good job of presenting themselves or presenting the case or representing their client in a
There,
particularly effective fashion. And if
there are,
so, there.
yeah, sorry, there are definitely attorneys who have appeared before me and continue to appear before me, who I have found to be very effective, that I thought that they were very effective advocates. And the traits that they have, I've thought about it, that I realize they're very good communicators,
Hmm.
and that's because they're very respectful. They're not overly aggressive. They're not jerks.
Hmm. Mhm.
They're incredibly polite, and they wait for their turn to speak. And then when they do speak, they're direct, and they're concise.
Ah,
And so their message um, is all the more important to me because the way it's delivered,
yeah.
that they're polite, they're respectful, and I think I want to listen to them.
Yeah.
They're not insulting the other side. They're not getting into petty disputes. They're not raising their voice, being angry. Um, and they're someone who gains a lot of credibility with me. And I think
Yeah.
that's really important as an advocate or an attorney, is to or a party who's presenting their case, is to establish credibility with your audience. And I think that's not only true in a courtroom, but any kind of business or professional setting.
Is there anything they do? And I'm not fishing for anything. It's not. I don't have anything on my mind. But is there anything that they do besides what you articulated that allows them to establish their credibility quickly with you?
For me, it's that they are, first of all, very polite and
Mhm.
courteous to opposing counsel, to
Mhm.
the court, and everyone. That immediately establishes credibility in my mind. Then when I hear what they have to say, they are honest. Also, they concede things that they need to concede, weaknesses of their case, but then
Mhm.
a good advocate then can then explain why I should still rule in their favor. Um, and I respect that skill set.
Yeah. It's actually you're making a really interesting point for me, uh, which is executive presence is in the eye of the beholder. And what I mean by that is there's clearly a culture in the courtroom that you feel strongly about. And when you described your own judicial temperament and what you expected in the courtroom, it was all of the things that if an attorney displays those things, you convey upon them, uh, having the proper temperament themselves.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I think you're right. That's a really good point.
And it's interesting. Uh, I can imagine. I guess my point to my students would be, hey, you need to understand what your audience considers, what creates credibility in their mind, what creates trust, what creates respect. Oh, they really appreciate being polite. They really appreciate being concise. They really appreciate understanding how the processes work and being efficient. And if you understand what their definitions are, then you can fall within their umbrella, which I think is really interesting.
That's a really good insight.
Um, yeah, I mean, I think so. Thank you for sharing that. Um, so, just the last couple of questions. Um, was developing this judicial presence a challenge for you, uh, or no? And if it was a challenge, what are the things that you did to develop it?
Well, I think before I was appointed to be a judge, I practiced law for 28 years, and I developed my own courtroom personality or persona, or the way I dealt with people, which was, as I explained, treating people with respect and civility and being courteous. Um, and so when I became a judge, and I began presiding over cases and trials, um, it was kind of easy to adapt that. What surprised me was the level of stress and hostility that a lot of people bring to the courtroom. I think
Hmm.
they
Mhm.
watch courtrooms on TV, and they think that the way to behave is to interrupt people or be rude. And I think a lot of people feel it makes them feel good to have an attorney who insults people, the other side, but it doesn't help their cause, because it's not helping me decide their case. And in fact, I view that attorney with less credibility. So, so I think I still work at it every day, and have to focus on making sure people feel heard, and that I try not to interrupt them and let them explain their side of the story and their case. But at the same time, I have to balance this fairness with of letting somebody be heard with efficiency, because we of course have to be efficient, and I only have so much time for each case. I may have 15 or 16 cases in one day.
So you raised an interesting point. There may be people that do things or things that happen in your court that challenge your executive presence or your judicial presence. Would that be true?
Almost every day. That's absolutely true.
Okay. And how do you maintain your calm, your sense, particularly in response to situations that trigger you?
Right. So I get a lot of people in court, attorneys and self-represented parties, who are upset, they're stressed, or that's just their personality. They're combative by nature, and they only have one mode, which is to insult people or to be rude. And so I I do deal with a lot of people, a lot of angry people, people who will say things to me that are disrespectful, or that I'm surprised at the tone that they're taking. Um, First of all, I tell myself, in order to, I try to prevent myself from reacting and becoming embroiled
Mhm.
with them. Um, and my personally, what I do is I think of, there's a movie called Monty Python and the Holy Grail, and so in that movie, there's a point where one of the actors says, "What a strange person," because the one of the actors is acting very strangely and rude. He's rude, and so they say, "What a strange person," and I just think that to myself, and it calms me down, because I'm trying not to engage or fight with the person, but it calms me down, and I think, yeah, that's really strange behavior. If I need to, I will call the person out, and I'll explain that's not acceptable behavior. And you can't speak that way in the courtroom, and I expect you to be respectful to the other parties.
Okay, that's really interesting. Have you ever lost it? And if so, how did you recover it?
So we have training as judges,
Hmm.
and one of the things we're taught is that if you begin to feel that you're going to lose your temper, then you take a break.
Hmm.
You get off the bench and don't get embroiled. So I've I've felt myself getting angry at times, and that's when I've called a break. Thank goodness I don't think I've ever really lost it on the bench,
Mhm.
but I've started to feel that way, and I've taken a break,
Hmm.
take 15 minutes, calm down, and then come back out, and after I've told myself, what a strange person.
Or maybe something else about that person, I assume. Uh,
Maybe.
is you described your definition of judicial presence. You know a number of other judges. Would you describe these other judges you're thinking of to have the same judicial presence?
So when I was an attorney, I appeared before a lot of judges, and some I thought were great judges who treated everyone with respect and listened, and you left, whether you won or you lost the case, you felt you were dealt with fairly. Other judges I felt were condescending and did not treat people with respect and were
Hmm.
arrogant.
Hmm.
And you left feeling that you weren't dealt with fairly. So that made a big impression on me. That was one of the reasons why I applied to become a judge, because I wanted to be
Hmm.
one of those judges who made people feel that they were dealt with fairly and that they had their evidence considered,
Yeah.
and they were treated with respect. So yes, there are judges. There are some of my colleagues, I'm sure, who behave differently. But there are certain colleagues that I have and that judges who I appeared before when I was an attorney who I hold up as models. And I would watch their behavior, and I still do. I learn something new every time I observe another judge. And I think I really like that behavior. I like
Hmm.
that about how they dealt with that situation, or what they
Yeah.
said, or how they treated the person. And I try to use those things myself. I'm always learning new things.
Yeah. Huh, how interesting. Yeah. Um, what else? I want to be respectful of your time, and I've already spent more than half an hour. Is there anything else I should ask you?
I don't think so. I think that covered the main points that I would have to offer.
Okay. Really interesting, and really made me think. And when it makes me think, that's really helpful because I'm going to make my class think.
Thank you. I think that's a really good insight about the the attorneys or parties who I find to be credible. It's probably because it's characteristics that I value in myself that I try to emulate.
Yeah, and I'm probably going to start my class off with that tomorrow. That executive presence is in the eye of the beholder, so you better understand the beholder.
That's a good. Oh, it's all about who is your audience. I mean, it's always important to know who is your audience. And I see it every day where attorneys or parties don't think about who their audience are. I did a jury trial 2 weeks ago, and one of the parties just didn't understand who their audience was. They were saying things that were offending their, their,
Yes.
their, their audience, and did
Uh,
not resonate with the audience. And I think you're right. That's a good point. It's really important to know who your audience is, and
and what their values are.
what their values are. That's a good point.
Yeah. Huh. All right.
Thank you so much, Tracy. It was
Oh, no, no. Thank you so much. Asking the questions was easy, and spending, I'm not working at 8 o'clock at night, or now 8:40. I will send this clip back to you, and I'll show you the clips that I'm gonna
I'd be
give.
interested in the clips that you end up using. Yeah.
All right. All right, Rob. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Tracy. I learned a lot.
Pleasure. Take care. I'll talk to you in a bit. Really appreciate it. Have a
All
good
right.
night.
Hope to see
See you
you
in a bit.
soon. Take care.
So long.
Bye-bye.